everybody. Welcome again to the Winning Digital Customers live cast. I'm Howard Tiersky, and today we're going to be talking about how your brand can take a stand. A nice rhyming title of our topic today. So often it doesn't rhyme, but today it rhymes. Now, let's talk about why would you care about taking a stand as a brand? Well, you know, if you look at many, in fact, of the most successful brands today, they tend to stand for something. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about why this matters in detail in a minute. But just think of a few examples. So a brand like Nike, which took a strong stand on matters, for example, of Black Lives Matter and racial justice. When they did that, they saw their sales skyrocket. An authentic, a strong position of something they stood for made their brand even more valuable and attracted even more customers. And you know, a brand that's taken a recent stand on the other end of the political spectrum, shall we say, is Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, of course, is privately owned, a very conservative, Christian conservative company that has taken very, very conservative stands on matters of gay rights and other matters. And you know, wherever you may stand in the political spectrum, I'm personally much more on the Nike side than on the Chick-fil-A side. But there's no denying that in both cases, those strong standing for something has made a big difference. Chick-fil-A is, Nike, by the way, is now number 89 on the Fortune 500, and as I mentioned, has seen their sales and their value surge since they took that recent strong stand. Chick-fil-A is a privately held company, but did you know that they are the third largest in revenue quick serve restaurant chain in the United States after McDonald's and Starbucks? Third, arguably most successful chain, and of course, in both cases, clearly taking a strong social stand was not the only thing that's contributed to their success. If Nike shoes fell apart when they put them on their feet, you know, or if Chick-fil-A sandwiches tasted terrible, I'm sure they would not be successful. But, and we're going to talk a little bit about the recipe for customer love. One of the things that is key to really achieving a strong, passionate customer base is standing for something. And both of these companies have successfully done that. And I'm going to talk today about how you can do that too. But I also want to make it clear that standing for something doesn't necessarily mean politically. These are two, what you could call kind of political, social type stands. But let me give you another example. Here's a brand that stands for something, Apple. Now, I don't think Apple takes a strong social stand on most issues. Maybe occasionally they weigh in on something, but for the most part, what they stand for is their tagline, or that used to be their tagline, think different, but the idea of empowering creative individuals, empowering you with the tools to enable you to express yourself and make your mark in the world. That's what Apple has always stood for. Or another brand that stands for something I would argue is Haagen-Dazs. Just stands for the joy of indulgence. And no doubt we could come up with many more brands, whether it's Walmart or Starbucks, that stand for something that isn't a social point, but is rather possibly a customer-related value or something else. So we're going to talk more about this in detail, but I just wanted to begin by introducing what do we mean by taking a stand. And these are all examples of brands that have taken a stand, brands that stand for something, and it has made a significant impact on their success in the marketplace. However, I would argue that many, if not most, brands don't really stand for anything, or at least not for very much. Let me just give you some random brand examples. United Healthcare, my healthcare company, also the company that does my healthcare insurance company for my whole company. What do they stand for? I don't know. Citibank, what do they stand for? We've researched this on a number of brands, and usually Dell, what do they stand for? You know, if we asked someone what Ben & Jerry's stands for, I think they would say they're a company that stands for some combination of nature, natural ingredients, the joy of Vermont and the green rolling hills, and you really get an emotional sense. If someone said what does Dell stand for? They might say, I don't know, computers. But that's not standing for something. That's just people knowing what your product is, right? Even Macy's. a brand that gets a lot of consumer attention and appreciation, and obviously they do some cool things like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. But if I said, what is really Macy's all about? What do they stand for? I would argue that they don't really stand for anything the way that Apple does, the way that Disney does, the way that Whole Foods does. And I don't mean to pick on these brands, because I think the brands that I'm mentioning that do stand for something are really the exception. And the brands that I'm showing you here are more the rule. And Citi doesn't stand for anything, but what does Chase stand for? What does Wells Fargo stand for? United Healthcare, if they don't stand for anything, you could probably pick 5 other insurance companies. And I'm sure you could pick, not Apple, but you could pick what does Lenovo stand for, right? What is, so the majority of brands, I would argue, don't stand for anything. And I would ask you to consider for your own brand, do you really stand for something? And I don't mean that somewhere deep in the bowels of your company you don't have a mission statement. I mean truly stand for something in the marketplace. Now, in my book, Winning Digital Customers, we talk about the importance of customer love. And I'm not going to go into it in depth in this live cast. We've certainly done others where we talk about it in detail, but we talk about the fact that the brands that are the most successful today in the marketplace are those that are loved by their customers. And we've given many examples in the past and shown you statistics and numbers and stock valuations to prove this point. And we've talked about the fact that there's a continuum of love, from loved down to resonant, relevant, irrelevant, and ultimately non-existent. And every brand exists somewhere on this continuum. And that we can look at so many examples to show that as brands move up this continuum, it's not just that good feeling they get of having their customers love them more. They get better business results. Their revenue, their growth rate increases, their profitability increases, their customer loyalty increases, and ultimately, typically, their valuation increases from a stock price perspective if they're a public company, or if they're not, then whatever, the value of their company, which is obviously one of the most important components of business success, increases. Chick-fil-A, for example, being an enormously valuable company, albeit not a public company. So, also in my book, I talk about the recipe. So it's easy to say you should be loved, but is that one of those just sort of magical, abstract, or like, how do I make someone love me? How do I make someone, or how do I inspire people to love my brand? It may seem like a kind of a puzzle, right? People either love you or they don't love you. Well, no. In fact, there's a recipe for getting customers to love your brand. We call it the customer love formula. And we go into it in detail in my book, Winning Digital Customers. But I'm going to give you a high level of it here, because we're really focused in today's topic on one component of that formula. But I just wanted to remind you of the formula. The first layer of the pyramid, so to speak, and this is only 3-part formula. In order to be loved, you must meet your customers' needs consistently. Meet their needs consistently. The second level is you must periodically or occasionally delight them, which means exceed their needs. Do something extra and above they don't expect. By the way, you don't have to be loved in order to get their business. If you simply meet their needs consistently, customers may come back to you. They may come back to you again and again. But that doesn't necessarily mean they love you. It doesn't necessarily mean they're willing to pay a price premium for you. It doesn't necessarily mean they're loyal and that they won't go somewhere else if someone else who will meet their needs, for example, for a lower cost. So meeting needs is essential to business. But if you want to be loved, you got to do more. Occasionally delighting the customer is the second level. And the third and last level, and the one that we're focused on mostly today, which is that you must resonate with the customer, which means you must stand for something that the customer cares about, something larger than just the product, just the cup of coffee that you're giving them, just the computer that you're selling them, a bigger idea of some sort. That's the top level. And when you accomplish all 3 of these things, this is when you inspire customer love. And another way of looking at these 3 levels, and the reason why these levels resonate emotionally so much with customers, because when we talk about love, we're of course talking about your customer's emotional relationship with your brand. When you meet their needs consistently, you demonstrate to the customer that you understand them, because you must understand them to meet their needs, right? Someone has to understand my needs in order to meet my needs. You get what's important to them. You understand them. When you delight them, when you do those extra things, the things you don't have to do, they're not promised, they're extra things you're doing, that demonstrates to the customer that you care about them. You like them. You are doing something more for them than you even need to do in order to get their dollar. The relationship is about more than that. You must actually care. So in the first one, you're not necessarily showing that you have an emotional connection to the customer at the meets needs. You're just showing that you understand them. And that prompts some emotional appreciation by the customer. In the second level, when you show that you actually have emotional feelings towards the customer, you care about them because you're going above and beyond for them, then that creates even more emotional connection. But when you resonate with the customer, when you demonstrate that you stand for something that the customer also stands for, in other words, that's what resonates means. I mentioned Chick-fil-A and Nike earlier. Chick-fil-A absolutely does not resonate with me. In fact, to be honest, they anti-resonate with me. I am not going to go to Chick-fil-A and get a chicken sandwich, no matter how good their chicken sandwiches are, because they've pushed me away through through what they stand for, through the brand values, because they don't resonate. They anti-resonate with my values, but they positively resonate with enough people. And when you positively resonate with people, you massively increase the love and appreciation and business you get from those people. If you're also giving them the other two levels of the pyramid, that it well makes up for the people that, like me, that they've turned away. And that's why their business is so successful. And Nike's on the other end, right? There are people that when Nike supported Colin Kaepernick and took a Black Lives Matter social stance, their Nike stock briefly dropped. And there were people who said, I will never buy Nike shoes again. And there may very well be people who today are not buying Nike shoes because they are so sort of, again, anti-resonate with Nike's social justice stance. But net, those people are more than made up for by the people who positively resonate with that and therefore love the brand that much more. So when you resonate with the customer, it shows the customer, wow, this brand is like me, meaning this brand stands for something that I also care about. We are one. We share a common cause. And that completes the pyramid of the three levels of emotion that cause someone to really feel that love, or that inspires that love for the brand. So that's the formula. Now, in my book, I talk a lot about methods to meet the needs and delight the customers. And it's a lot about customer research and understanding their needs and removing points of pain. And that's not what today's topic is. But of course, there's much to be said about that, extensively covered in my book. And also, we've talked about it on a lot of prior sessions together. But let's talk today about the top step of the pyramid. How do you resonate with a customer? How do you stand for something that customers that make the customers resonate with, that it's who they are, or, and I just added one more build onto this slide, or who they want to be, meaning there may be some people who resonate with Nike's social justice stance, but they may not actually take any actions themselves. It's like that aspirational feeling. You resonate with who I am, or who I wish I were, or what I believe in, even if I personally don't stand for it as much as you may be doing so. And I'm going to give you some examples of that coming up. So you may be wondering to yourself, well, okay, if I work for a brand like Citibank or like United Healthcare or any of the millions of other examples of brands that you can really honestly say, yeah, we have a mission statement. Yeah, in theory, we may have a tagline, but to be perfectly honest, if I were to really talk to customers and say, what do you honestly, sincerely believe that our brand really cares about and stands for? They'd be like, I don't really know. You're just a drugstore. You're just a health insurance company. You're just a hardware store. You're just a camera manufacturer or whatever. So there are 7 discrete things that you can do to communicate that you stand for something. And I'm going to go through these 7 things for you right now. You don't necessarily have to do all 7 of them. The more of them you do, the more powerful your message will be. Probably if you're doing 4 or 5 of them, you're in really good shape. So it's not about, I don't know if we could even find a company that's doing all 7. Probably we could, but I'm sure we could also find many companies that are successful at communicating that they stand for something that aren't necessarily doing all 7. But I want to walk through all 7 because some may be more practical for your brand and easier for you to implement. So what are the 7? The first is positioning. The first is just telling people that you stand for something. Here's a Whole Foods ad. The highest standards weren't available, so we created them. Whole Foods, of course, what do they stand for? They stand for quality food, right? They stand for, and again, it's not just about, oh, we have a good product. Whole Foods is more than that. Whole Foods is a belief. Whole Foods is a mission, that says, organic food, high quality ingredients. Whole Foods is on a mission that's bigger than just ringing a cash register to make sure that people are eating more nutritiously. And, their tagline is America's healthiest grocery store. So that's what they're about. Now, and that's what they're communicating. That's what they're telling people. Now, many brands position themselves with a certain value. They take a stand in their advertising, but that's the only P that they fulfill. And usually that falls flat. People today are very cynical about advertising and brands and what they say about themselves, which is why there's 6 other Ps. But nevertheless, let's start by saying, well, the first thing is to tell people what you stand for. By the way, some of the brands that do this the best don't even tell people what they stand for. They use the other Ps and they don't need to say it, or they don't say it a lot because people see it demonstrated in other ways. So positioning is not necessarily the most powerful, but it's certainly helpful. And when you use positioning, when you're using the other Ps, which I'm going to share with you in a moment, positioning can help call their attention to it. They can help remind people, hey, this is who we are. And when people have seen all the evidence in other ways, and then your positioning reminds them of it, it can help to get the maximum impact, as long as it doesn't seem like you're taking away from the authenticity of what you're doing. Sometimes if we tell people too loudly and too frequently about all the good things we're doing and all the things we stand for, it seems a little disingenuous, right? So you have to find the right balance. In any case, that's the first P. The second P is product. So product is the experience that you give your customer, whether you're in the product business or the services business. You could argue another way of saying product would be the overall experience you give your customer. But of course, experience doesn't start with a P, right? And then I'd have 6 Ps and 1 E, so that would never work. But product is also a reasonable way of putting it as well. So if you go to Disney World and you walk around Disney World, you are going to experience key values of Disney without them ever having to tell you. Of course, Disney's famous tagline is the happiest place on earth. But if you walk around Disney World, you will get a sense of what Disney stands for without necessarily anyone needing to do any positioning. And if you look at the totality of Disney's products, you'll also get a sense of what is this company about? Wholesome family entertainment that's great for the whole family, appropriate for kids, great for adults, strong kind of moral messages. And by the way, they're very careful about any movie or other piece of media content that they put out under the Disney brand to make sure that nothing breaks that message. They have other brands that the Disney Corporation, which is a little bit distinct from the Disney brand, right? Because you can have a company that has many brands, but within the Disney Corporation, they have other movie studios and other things where they do things that aren't necessarily, for example, Disney owns ABC, that aren't necessarily Disney brand consistent. But when something comes out under the Disney brand, they're very careful to make sure that it's consistent with what they want the Disney brand to stand for, because they know that brand is heavily influenced by what people experience in the products and services they get from that brand. This is much more powerful, I would argue, than positioning. And let's look at an example of that. So for years, decades perhaps, United Airlines' tagline has been "Fly the friendly skies." Now, I am a regular United customer, and I have a good experience on United. I don't have any bad stories to tell about United for the most part. I would not say that they are in any way unfriendly. But on the other hand, I have to admit that my experience of their product, I can't really argue that they're any more friendly than any of the other airlines I fly. I fly United a lot because I live just outside New York City in New Jersey, and they have a hub at Newark Airport. So it just makes sense for me to fly United a lot. And again, I think they're fine. They're great. But I have occasion needed to fly on Delta, for example, or other airlines, and I largely would experience the same JetBlue. I largely experience the same level of friendliness. So I'm not really convinced from United's positioning that they are the friendly skies. Now, I infrequently fly Southwest, but I have to tell you that I don't know what Southwest's tagline is. Clearly, one of their values is low cost. But man, when you go on a Southwest Airlines flight, you really feel like they are friendly. They're super friendly when they greet you. They crack jokes when they're, making their announcements about safety and all that to the passengers. To me, as a flyer, this is a much friendlier airline. Nothing against United, but they are demonstrating through their product the friendliness, whereas United is trying to demonstrate it through positioning. Southwest, by the way, though smaller, is a much more financially successful airline than United, and I would argue that one of the reasons is because they stand for something a lot more than does United Airlines. So let's take the third one. The third one is passion. Now, positioning is saying what you're all about, and product is really demonstrating it through your business, through what you do, through what you deliver, right? If you're an airline, your product is essentially the experience of travel. If you're Disney, your product is your films, etc. Passion is really demonstrating that why that's there, right? The idea of a person or combination of people who have this strong desire to create that kind of product experience for you, for whom that positioning is not just an advertising slogan, but is what they really believe. It is the personification of the brand positioning, really. Because people know that brands can't really feel anything. It's not a person, a brand. It's just a company name and a logo. But if you take a brand like Walt Disney, even though he's no longer alive, you have the passion of a Walt Disney, that character, that figure. If you take something like Elon Musk and Tesla or his other companies, you know that behind that brand's positioning around, let's say, innovation or energy conservation and saving the earth is a person who really cares, who is really passionate about what it is that the brand stands for. And that is something that adds a tremendous amount of credibility, whether it's, and founders, by the way, can be very, very helpful in that, right? A Jeff Bezos at Amazon, Howard Schultz at Starbucks. Now, actually, I should put an asterisk on that to say Howard Schultz was not actually the founder of Starbucks. He bought Starbucks when it was a teeny tiny company with, I think, only, if I recall, 4 or 5 coffee shops in the Seattle area. So it just goes to show you don't have to be the founder, but obviously he was the push behind the massive growth and the Starbucks becoming the brand that it is today. But the point is, it doesn't have to be a founder, but the idea that there's a human spirit behind the positioning of that brand and behind what makes that product stand for something, that feeling of passion is our third P of how to make your company stand for something. Now, that may be one of those you say, but I don't have someone like that. I don't have an Elon Musk running my company. Well, that's fine, because there's 7 Ps and you don't have to apply all of them. Steve Jobs, of course, should be another example at some place like Apple. Ben and Jerry's, obviously, you have the 2 founders. So it sure does help. But who's the founder of Whole Foods? Now, I'm sure there's an answer to that question, but personally, I don't know. I know Ben and Jerry. I know Elon Musk. I know Jeff Bezos. I don't have any idea who founded Whole Foods. So, and I'm guessing that most people who shop at Whole Foods don't. So it just shows you that you don't have to have a Walt Disney passion behind it. But it's one of the things that does help. It's a magnifier and multiplier when you have it. So let's go to our next P. Our next P is people. Now you might think, well, didn't you just talk about people? Elon Musk is a person. Yes. But in this context, I'm not talking about the founder or that kind of figurehead that represents the brand. I'm talking about all your people, the people that work at your, behind the counter, the people who work in the call center, the totality of someone's experience. When I interface with somebody who works at a car dealership or somebody who's at the call center or somebody who's in the store helping me, this is the experience that I have. The values that they seem to convey are a key part of the people component. And one of the most loved brands in America is UPS. And I find that interesting because you could argue it's kind of a utility, right? I mean, just package delivery. But the reason that people love the UPS brand, and this has been studied many times, is because of the delivery person. It's because of the driver. It's because people get to know that person who comes to their house every day, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. People have that kind of relationship. And it's that connection. And there's many, many stories. And if you Google like people of UPS, you'll find many stories about UPS drivers doing very touching and helpful things for the people on their routes, whether it's related to the delivery of a package or whether it's just they knew it was their 75th birthday, or they knew, it was their anniversary, or they knew that they were sick and needed something. Here's, kind of a typical picture of the UPS driver who knows the family pet and is playing with the family dog. So that feeling, and that of course contributes to that feeling of connection and wholesomeness and caring that people feel about the UPS driver and by extension, the UPS brand. And obviously this is not going to be true of every single UPS driver, but UPS has clearly done something right because it's true of enough UPS drivers that this is a common experience that UPS customers have. Okay, so that is, what are we on? I've lost count, fourth or fifth P. I think that was our fifth P. The sixth P is policies, how you handle conducting business. And an example of this would be Amazon and returns. Amazon stands for delivering the very best possible customer experience. And one of the areas in which they have an outstanding customer experience is when you want to return something. Now, you might argue that for many companies, the idea of accepting a return is a necessary evil, not something they necessarily want to make easy. You know, you go to some stores and there's 10 lanes of people ready to take your money if you want to buy something. And there's one line of if you want to return something. And sometimes, there's a bunch of people in that line and you have to wait 30 minutes in order to get to the front of that line in order to return something. They haven't gone out of their way to make it easy for you to return something because, of course, it's not in the business's interest to help you return something. You know, this is when you really demonstrate that you stand for something. It's easy for me as a business to stand for things that are going to make it better, that are clearly good for my business anyway. You know, to stand for, when you give me your credit card, I process it really fast. Well, of course, I'm trying to take your money. So that's not a bad thing to do. You want to get you out of there. But when I am committing as a business to something and demonstrating a policy, which is not necessarily in my interest, but is in the interest of the customer, that demonstrates a commitment to a value, in this case for Amazon, of making sure the customer's experience is the best over and above the obvious profit motive that any or most businesses have. So Amazon not only has a great and easy online experience on their website, but now they have this policy with Kohl's department stores. You can go into many Kohl's department stores and just bring them your returns. You don't even have to box them up. It would be very easy for Amazon to make it more difficult for us to return things, that you have to put them in your own box and you have to package it, and they could charge you for the return shipping, and you have to take it to the post office or the UPS store. I can literally walk into Kohl's just with that thing. I don't have to put it in a box or anything. You just give it to the person, and they can scan the QR code on my phone of Amazon, having returned, said I've gone and done my return on Amazon, and I can make that return. So Amazon has put policies in place which are consistent with what they stand for, even if they're not necessarily directly in their business self-interest. Now, I would argue in the long run, they are in their business self-interest because I'm more likely to buy things from Amazon if I know I can easily return them. And I'm also more likely to love a brand that really stands for something. But nevertheless, and by the way, policies don't always have to relate to the customer. It all depends on what it is you stand for. What is it you stand for? Some policies could relate to the cleanliness of something, or it could relate to a social, and I'm going to talk in a moment about other areas like philanthropy, but it could be a wide range of different types of policies. But in Amazon's case, because what they stand for is giving the customer the best possible experience, this policy or this set of policies that relate to returns is just one area of an example of how Amazon is demonstrating what they stand for through their policies. In contrast, let's talk about United again. And I hate to pick on United because I really do have very often a good experience with United, but this is just such a well-known story where United had policies that pertained to essentially waitlisting or removing passengers who've been bumped from a flight, right? Most people know that airlines oversell their flights, and if there's too many people who need to get on the flight, even if they booked a ticket, the airline will try to pay people to get off the flight. And of course, there was a famous debacle a couple years ago where United Airlines decided that somebody who'd already been seated on the flight was going to be removed in favor of another person, even though the person who was seated already had a ticket. But this was their policy. The individual refused and said, no, he didn't want to be taken off the flight, and eventually United sent security guards, or the airport sent security guards. There's some dispute. But in any case, security guards were dispatched and dragged this guy off the flight. And gosh, remember, this was the airline that's saying that they're the friendly skies, right? Now, of course, this happened on the ground, so maybe they're only friendly in the sky, Anyway, again, I'm not trying to give United a hard time. With all the flights that United runs all over the world, most of them don't have anything like this occur. But clearly, this one incident was an example, not just of an unfortunate moment, but of a policy that United had in place, which when implemented in this context, clearly went against what their brand was all about. If your brand is all about friendliness, you don't want to be dragging people off airplanes. That is definitely not friendly behavior. And just an example where in United's case, they did the opposite, right? They undercut what they were trying to say about their brand through their policies. And, to their credit, following this huge PR debacle, they changed the policy and they increased the amount that they're willing to pay people to be bumped off of a flight, and their CEO acknowledged and said it was a mistake. So clearly they learned something from this. But I highlighted here again, not to give United a hard time. We can all have these things happening in our companies. It happened to United in a very public way, in a very, I was on all over the news. But any company can have these situations where you have a brand that stands for one thing, and then all of a sudden, things happen as a result of your policies. It could be that if you have a brand that says you're safe, but you don't have policies that ensure that everything is safe, and then something happens that illustrates you're unsafe, that would be another example of your policies undermining what you want to stand for. So you want to make sure that your policies are in line with what you want to stand for. And sometimes, there can be situations where, and this kind of relates a little bit to the next one, which is problems. So let me talk about problems, and I think you'll see that there's a little bit of a connection between the idea of policy and the idea of problems. So when something goes wrong with your interaction with a brand, it's an opportunity to potentially lose you as a customer or to cement your loyalty for life. And in customer service jargon, this is often referred to as the service recovery paradox. If Amazon is supposed to get your birthday present or the present you're giving somebody for their birthday, and they fail to get it there, and so as a result, you call them up, and someone from the headquarters drives to a warehouse, picks one up in their car, and drives 4 hours to make sure that you get it on time. Obviously, that's not their normal behavior. And I'm not saying I'd made that up. I'm not saying Amazon did that. But if a company does that, clearly that's handling a problem in a way that demonstrates what they stand for. Not something they could do on every delivery, right? They'd go out of business. But handling an unusual situation in a way that demonstrates that they're living their values, whatever those values are, right? Ritz-Carlton's, and I'm not quite even sure exactly how to characterize Ritz-Carlton's, what they stand for, but I do feel like there's something there. They stand for clearly high-end luxury and providing the pampered, most luxurious possible experience, something like that. I'm not sure it's as powerful as some of the other examples I've given in terms of clarity of what they stand for, but they clearly recognize at Ritz-Carlton this idea that a problem, of course, you want to try to avoid problems, but when a problem occurs, it's an opportunity to demonstrate to the customer how far you're willing to go for them. So Ritz-Carlton has a policy where anyone who works in one of their hotels, if they see something that's wrong for a guest that needs to be made right, they have authorization to spend, I think it's up to $1,000, something like that, on whatever they think it will take to make it right for that guest right there at that moment. So they're empowered to solve problems because Ritz-Carlton recognizes, even if that might be more money than you could be, I'm staying one night at a Ritz-Carlton and I paid $350 for the room, and they're going to go spend $900 to make something right for me. Obviously, they're losing money on that stay, but they recognize that they have an impact on my emotional connection to the brand and potentially my lifelong loyalty, and therefore they're willing to spend the money. And so that's an extreme example, but how you handle customers that need an exception to a policy or have some other kind of problem is an opportunity to demonstrate in action, not just in words, what your brand is really all about, and that you're willing to do things that go against your own interest, if that's what it takes for what you stand for. The last of the 7 categories is philanthropy. And this is clearly a way of demonstrating something that you stand for from a social perspective. Now, many large companies have some philanthropic giving arm that may not necessarily get a lot of awareness, and they may not necessarily really make the brand seem like it stands for something. But other brands, and Tom's Shoes is an example of this, that was founded with the basic idea that for every pair of shoes that Tom's Shoes sells, they're going to give a pair to someone in need in the third world. And that's a key part of their brand, and it's something that they do. I forget, they've given away millions, I forget how many pairs of shoes, had a huge impact. Salesforce is another example. When they started Salesforce.com, they decided, and I forget the percentages, it may be 5%, but for every dollar they make, they either give a certain amount to charity or they provide licenses to Salesforce.com's very expensive software platform for free to not-for-profits, or very, very discounted to not-for-profits. And this is all part of their commitment to making sure that they're doing social good while they're also delivering a great cloud-based platform for people doing CRM and other things. So there are many ways in which a brand can be involved in philanthropy, but it really becomes a powerful part of what you stand for when it's substantial, not just a little bit. If you're a $10 billion company and you're giving away $5 million a year, this is not substantial. But when it's a significant part of how you operate and how you think as a company, that part of what we're trying to do is give back to the world, this has the potential to have a significant impact on the brand. So those are the 7 areas of the 7 Ps, the 7 ways that you can stand for something as a brand. And I just want to close out by answering this question that you might be asking yourself. And I get this question a lot when I talk about this topic of resonating with customers and standing for something, which is, but what should we stand for? It's easy when you are a founder-led company. It's easy when you're Apple and you already stand for something. But what if you're Citibank? Again, not to pick on them, but they were just my example from before. And you look around the company and you say, well, what do we really stand for? I mean, shareholder returns, being a bank, hopefully providing good customer service. But these aren't really a larger value. This isn't standing for something that's greater than the business. This is just basically the business, right? Delivering shareholder returns, hopefully growing customer, share of wallet, these types of things. This isn't standing for something. So when you don't have it, how do you find it, right? And it's difficult very often because it's not like you can go to any one person. If the CEO says, well, I believe in, saving dogs and cats, unwanted dogs and cats. That's my cause. That's what I care about and believe in. Well, if that's not meaningful to the rest of the organization, then it's probably not going to work that well. It's not like when you're a founder and you start a company, it's just you and 3 people. And then as you grow, people are attracted to that company in part because of the mission. But it's very hard to inject a mission like that. Very hard, not impossible, but very hard, or a lot harder anyway, than if it's done at the beginning. But if your business has not been built on a foundation of standing for something, I've given you 7 ways on how to express what you stand for. But if you don't know what it is, first you have to figure out what it is. So let me give you a few suggestions. I don't have the ultimate answer to what is life about and what does your company mean? But here are some suggestions. The first thing is to say, well, why was this company founded? Most companies were not just founded to make a buck. There was something that was behind the original. We founded a Swiss watch company because we believe in the craftsmanship of the beauty of watchmaking by hand. Or we believe that the excellence of a Swiss watch should be made affordable for the masses, right? So maybe the first one is more of a Rolex or a Audemars Piguet, and the second one is maybe more of a company like Oris that's making more economical Swiss watches, and that's just an example from one industry. And it may be that your company is 200 years old, and the reason that it was founded, is no longer a big part of the business today. But if you look back historically and say, well, why were we founded in the first place? Hewlett-Packard was founded with certain principles in mind, even if they're not a big part of what you see from the brand today. But you can reach back to that history and use that potentially as one of the ways where you determine what you stand for. Now, don't feel like you're locked into that. You may discover that that's not the best thing to use, but that's one source and then you have to sort of figure out how do you communicate and how do you get the whole company behind saying, hey, this is really what we're about. A second thing is to look at your employees. That's who really make up your company, and say, maybe you do a survey or do other kinds of research. Why do they work here? What brings them to this company? And you could say, well, to get paid, right? For the vacation, for the benefits. But beyond that, why do they choose to be at this company? Why have they chosen to build a career here? It's near my house. Well, those aren't good reasons. There may be good reasons for the individual, but that's not what we're looking for. But we're looking for, if I live in Chicago and I could have worked at any one of the large investment companies, probably, and gotten a job there, but this is the one I really wanted to work at. Why? Or maybe I didn't know when I was hired, but now that I'm here, this is why I stay. This is why I don't look to go for another job. And of course, you may get a lot of different kinds of answers, and some of them won't be about what the company stands for. I stay here because, again, it's near my house, or because one of my close friends works here. Well, those aren't the reasons that we're looking for this exercise, but you may hear other reasons like, we really care about our customers here. Or it may be that we have a different approach or philosophy about things. Or again, I don't know. But you're looking for some common threads where you say, wow, a lot of people really feel this is true about the company, even if it's a little blurry, even if it's not something that you're living in a complete way. It gives you a foundation to say, this is only a partially realized value or something we stand for, but it's something we can build on instead of artificially making up from scratch. What is something you're most proud of at the company? You know, if you were a shoe company, Tom's Shoes was created on the basis of giving shoes. But if you had a small program that not that many people knew about, where you were giving your product away, but you said, but you know, this is one of the things that makes our people the most proud. Maybe you want to expand that program or some other philanthropic activity. Take something that's already organically there, but expand it, especially if it's something that's bringing great pride to the company. Maybe you can magnify or expand something that already exists. And lastly, what are you doing that is most resonant to your customers? I would suggest that probably Citibank does resonate with some customers. Now, I don't know around what, and it may be only within one division, or it may be only within one product, or one salesperson, or one account executive, or one type of customer. I don't know. But there perhaps may be little islands of resonance, even if the brand overall doesn't have it in a powerful way. You want to conduct a study and look for that. Who are the customers that love Citibank? Most brands have somebody that loves them, you know, even if it's a limited percentage. Find, even if 1% of a brand's customers truly love the brand. And by the way, I did another one of these shows earlier, and I talked about my method for determining whether someone really loves your brand. So you might want to look at that. I'll try to put a link to that other video in the notes on this one. Find those people, even if there are only a few of them, and find out, how did you do it? How did you make those people love the brand? Because part of what you did was to resonate with them around something larger than just the business. And maybe that's something else that you can build on. So those are 4 things you can look for. And there may be more, but I'm out of time. In fact, this is 40 minutes. So we're definitely at the end of our live cast today. But those are 4 things you can look at to try to figure out, what is the thing that we want to be known for? What is the thing that's larger than our business? And then once you know what it is, then look back to the 7 Ps and say, well, is this part of our positioning? Are we telling people about this? Is this part of our product? Is this baked into the experience of somebody who's doing business with us? Do we have a founder or somebody, a CEO, somebody who's communicating their passion behind this particular thing? Are our people representing this on a daily basis? Et cetera, right? Through each of the 7 Ps. And now you're on your way to taking that one thing and making it something that's truly part of your brand and something that will be seen by your customers as something you stand for. And then you have the opportunity to resonate with your customers. And when you've got that top level of the pyramid, assuming you combine it with the 2 levels below it, you've created the right recipe for inspiring customer love. So hopefully that makes sense and it helps you. If you have any questions, by all means, send your questions in. We love questions. Happy to answer any follow-up questions on this. And with that, my best wishes to you at figuring out how to make sure that your brand is standing for something. I'll see you next time.